got to unmute your mic. Hello, everybody, and welcome in to Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk. I'm your host, Alex Brasky, alongside my co-host, Ajay Cybulski, here for the Batavia Daily News and Livingston County News. Each week, we'll discuss Buffalo's favorite football team, along with all of the comings and goings from Orchard Park. What's up, Ajay? Tell the people what we have in store for them today.
Yeah, Alex, how is it going? Excited to be back. A quick little turnaround here now with the NFL draft coming to a close. So obviously now a lot more to talk about, a lot of more things figured out. Obviously, we don't know how these draft picks will turn out, but at least we can discuss them. Of course, we're going to discuss the 2024 NFL draft class today. Maybe talk about some undrafted free agent signings. Frank Gore Jr., the son of Frank Gore, very notable one. And then the Greg Rousseau fifth-year option, where the kind of the roster stands with that. Wide receiver room, kind of where that's at as well. And then we'll take some questions from the fans. We reached out to some fans today, and they gave us some good questions to dive into. So we're going to do that as well.
Yeah, really excited to get going today. It's been a long weekend in the Bills media room covering the draft. It was exciting, yet a little bit monotonous at times. The highlight of the weekend had to be after the Bills drafted Keon Coleman. Had to wait a day to talk to him in person, but boy, once he stopped in Orchard Park, he truly delivered. Joking about the Macy's code 8979. Didn't spring for the $100 trench coat, but he also indulged in some cookies. I think that's really put Wegmans in a good position. They're now placing the cookies out front of their store, really doing their best to promote those fine, delicious treats that we had plenty of this past weekend in that Bills media room. But AJ, why don't we dive right in? The Bills 2024 draft class complete, along with several undrafted free agents, as you mentioned, signed by the team over the past few days. And they even brought a veteran wide receiver into the mix. So let's start with that second-round pick, Keon Coleman, picked at number 33, first pick of the second round. Player who will largely define this year's draft class and the performance of Brandon Beane and company in terms of how quickly he's able to acclimate to his new surroundings and make an impact within the Bills offense. I think the Bills need him to be an immediate contributor. Brandon Beane spoke about Coleman as an immediate contributor, stepping right in and hopefully earning that starting role, along with you have Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel in the mix as well. But you lose Stephon Diggs, you bring in Coleman, a big, strong target who can go up and get the ball. Brandon Beane mentioned his above-the-rim ability plenty of times. He played basketball at Michigan State, so that's really where that ability stems from. 6'3", 213 pounds. Your thoughts on this guy?
Yeah, he's definitely a polarizing guy. You know, the 4.6 40-yard dash, obviously discussed heavily amongst Bills fans. I don't love the pick, Alex. I don't hate the pick. I think I'm optimistic about it just for the fact that the Bills needed to find a big body, 50-50 ball, contested catch guy that can win in the red zone, can win when the cornerback is blanketing him. And I think that was what that Bills offense really needed to round out that room. Now, there were the Lad McConkeys of the world who went right after Keon Coleman at 34 to the LA Chargers. But to me, for Leggett to go at 32, you had Xavier Worthy they traded back for, and the Chiefs went up and got him at 28. So the Bills traded back when he was still on the board. Adonai Mitchell, who went to the Colts in the mid-second round, was still on the board. Troy Franklin, who, again, is more like of a Jalen Hyatt type, who kind of a feathery guy, has deep speed, but he fell last year to the third round of the Giants. Franklin obviously fell to the fourth round. So a lot of the guys that they met with, a lot of guys that were talked about amongst Bills fans, and they choose Keon Coleman, who I think, again, was a shock to some. And again, I like it. I don't love it. I think the separation is a concern. He does struggle to separate at times. But again, he is an athlete. The 4.6 40 is a obviously concern to an extent. But if you go and watch his highlights, or if you ever get the chance to, he does have speed to break away from defenders. Obviously, a lot of highlight catches at Florida State. But again, you mentioned it here in our a little write-up before the show. Larry Fitzgerald, Anquan Bolden, Jerry Rice, Cooper Kupp, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Keenan Allen, all guys that have ran that time and still had that ability to be successful in the NFL. So he doesn't have the nuance to route running that those guys that I just mentioned have. But again, he can develop that as a Buffalo Bill. And I like the pick again. Don't love it. I think it rounds out. You want to have like a basketball kind of style of wide receiver room. You want the quick guy, the separator, all that stuff. And I think Keon Coleman really fits that kind of mold. Will it work out? Remain to be seen. But I like the idea and why Brandon Beane went with Keon Coleman at pick 33.
Yeah, I think I'm along the same wavelength with you. Excuse me. I like it. I don't love it. I appreciate the conviction in Brandon Beane trading out of the first round and knowing he'd still be able to secure his guy, Keon Coleman, at the top of the second round. So I do like that aspect of it. I do like the Bills' confidence in him moving forward. The speed, albeit a concern, you read online, Next Gen Stats, elite. His game speed is elite. Second overall at the Combine. In terms of the participants at the Combine on go routes last season in college, 21.71 miles per hour. Like I said, that's second overall of all the wide receivers who competed at the Combine. So that game speed is there. Perhaps that testing speed isn't there for him, but I think once he gets onto the field, he'll be able to beat defenders deep and create that separation. He's a good contested catch guy, a low drop rate of about, I think, 4% last year in college. So this is a steady receiver that I think is going to give Josh Allen that target he's been looking for throughout his career along the outside, deep down the field, go up and get it. You saw Stephon Diggs last year against the Chiefs drop a key pass down the field late in that game that would have put the Bills ahead in that game or potentially put them in line to take the lead in that game. And I think that's what Coleman presents for you. Deep down the field, being able to go up and get it and pull the ball away from defenders. He's also a great personality to fit into this locker room. You saw his pre-draft or his pre-press availability comments, and then afterward he goes over to the food table. So I think this is a guy that Bills Mafia is going to fall in love with right away. And in terms of his production, like I said, that will tell the story of this draft class, but he's got all the tools that the Bills are looking for. We'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, and Josh Allen, like you said, Alex, at the presser, Keon talked about the idea of Josh Allen wanted me. So I think that's a big factor into this whole thing and this whole scenario is I think Josh Allen did like Keon Coleman. And again, they needed, I'm not saying this is a Gabe Davis replacement, but I just don't want to hear the Gabe Davis comparisons from Keon Coleman.
Or the Kelvin Benjamin comparisons, please God.
Yeah, because like Keon Coleman was considered a first-round talent back in September. Now, obviously, the production, Jordan Travis went down at Florida State. His production kind of tailed off. Then you add that on to what he did at the Combine. So you're looking at a receiver that kind of had one thing add up after another, and that's why his stock fell a little bit. But obviously, the Bills were still high enough on him to pick him with the first pick in the second round. So, again, I just don't want to hear the Gabe Davis comps because I think he has way more upside, obviously better hands. I think he's better vertically. And again, they're similar. Like they can both run block well. They're both tall, vertical guys. But I think Keon Coleman coming out of college was way more highly of a touted prospect than Gabe Davis.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. Now, we'll circle back, talk a little bit about more about Coleman as we go. But let's move on to another big piece at number 60 in the second round. Utah safety Cole Bishop, 6'2", 206 pounds. He can really hit like a Mack truck, comes at you fast, delivers a big blow, joins Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp as the team's top three safeties, although Brandon Beane did say it may take some time for Bishop to crack the starting lineup. He does have that high potential. He's a former teammate of Dalton Kincaid at Utah, and something he credited Kincaid with was his ability to cover tight ends and how he's really learned how to do that. And we all know Kansas City, they just re-signed Travis Kelce, I think, to a 2-year deal. So Bills are hoping that Bishop can come in and help them cover some of the talented tight ends in the AFC.
Yeah, I like Bishop. Favorite pick of the draft. I think obviously there's a little bias. I got to speak with him at the Senior Bowl, so obviously that comes to mind. But he stood out to me at the Senior Bowl. He was always a guy that kind of fit the Sean McDermott mold. I thought he excelled in practices during that week down in Mobile. That's when things really started to heat up with the Bills. I asked him previously that day about his relationship with Dalton Kincaid. He noted that obviously the best tight end he's ever had to guard. Great guy. He texted him throughout this whole process. So I'm sure Dalton Kincaid's very happy with the pick. But again, Cole Bishop, fast, a leader at Utah, can play at the deep third of the field, can play on the line of scrimmage. He's a very versatile guy that I think the Bills needed at that position. And who knows? I don't know if he'll out-snap Taylor Rapp or outstart Taylor Rapp and Mike Edwards, but I think there is a conversation to be had if this guy can come right in and start day one. I think that might be a little crazy, but I also think that's a conversation worth noting, especially come late July when training camp really starts to pick up, because his versatility he offers to a defense with Bobby Babich now taking over. I think Babich will really like that. And the Bills have proven again to really accelerate the assimilation or the ascension of these defensive backs in their careers. So Bishop to me is just a typical Sean McDermott guy, very good character, good leader at Utah. And again, I think the versatility begs you to question, will he outsnap one of Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp at safety this upcoming year?
And quick as all heck too. I think he ran in the low fours at
4.45.
Yeah, so very, very impressive specs as well. But you have to like what the Bills did with their first two picks. I know some fans a little bit of anxiety when they traded out of the first round, and I know that these players do have to still hit the field and prove themselves at the NFL level, but addressing two significant needs right off the jump in this year's draft, wide receiver and safety. I think all fans wanted them to address wide receiver and obviously safety with the losses of Jordan Poyer and potentially Micah Hyde in the back of everybody's mind. So you have to like the Bills' start of the draft from that aspect.
Yeah, they got two needs. They drafted two needs, and they're trying to also, I guess we'll get to it too, but they're also trying to stack picks for next year. They got some picks next year. They're probably going to get a comp pick from Gabe Davis going to Jacksonville, so that probably adds a fourth-round pick, But yeah, I do like what this Bills team did in the first two rounds. Again, like the Bishop pick more than the Coleman pick, just because I think Bishop was a guy that just made sense for me since January. And I think that he was, when I did the article for the safety potential targets, he was
you were all over a lot of these guys.
Yeah, he was the top name on that list. So like I was very looking forward to, I was sitting in my house. I'm like, man, Bishop makes sense here. You had a little run at safety. Bullard went off the board from Georgia. So I'm like, man, Bishop might fall in their laps. Maybe it's a little bit of a reach to some NFL draft analysts, but obviously the Bills liked what they saw in him. And then again, Coleman, yeah, same thing. They got their guy at 33. Obviously he was their guy. A lot of talented receivers went off the board right around him. So after the first two picks, I'm feeling pretty good with how the Bills, handled those two needs in Detroit.
And wrapping up day two, the Bills satisfied another need, maybe not as pressing as wide receiver and safety, with incumbent starters Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver coming back. But you take DeWayne Carter at number 95 of the third round. Looks like he can step in and contribute right away. He's got versatility at that position, can play the one technique, can play the three technique, and the leadership ability really shines through with this guy. A 3-year captain at Duke. They called him Mr. Duke down there. He was really beloved by the Blue Devils fan base, and kind of expecting the same here with Bills Mafia. He's got a $1 million smile, this guy, and he showed it off during his press availability at One Bills Drive. And strong football pedigree. Several family members played high-level college football. And just what do you see with this guy that might allow him to come in and produce for the Bills at a position where they need the depth?
Yeah, again, it's the big word with DeWayne Carter. It's the versatility that he can bring. Like you said, he can start at one tech. He can start at three tech. He has that experience where he can come right in and be a rotational piece. 3-year captain, like you mentioned. Not much production as a college player, but again, decent enough where you feel comfortable he can come right in. 5.5 sacks as a junior, 11 tackles for loss, 41 tackles. So he does have some solid production. Sorry, that's my email notification going off. But
we got high school sports.
DeWayne Carter is a solid add. Again, Sean McDermott guy. He's another one I wrote about because I just felt like he fit the mold. He was talked about a lot by many Bills content creators. I think a lot of them were fond of Carter. Joe DeRosa specifically, from Cover One, was really high on him. So I think DeWayne Carter is a guy that just, again, made sense at that spot. They had a glaring hole there. They needed rotational depth at defensive line. They added Deshaun Williams, Austin Johnson, Eli Anku. What's he going to be? So I think DeWayne Carter brings more sustainability and certainty to fortify behind Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver. And again, he can come in on an obvious pass rushing down and take out Daquan Jones if Daquan Jones has obviously played a bunch of snaps, or he can come in and take out Ed Oliver if it's an obvious rushing down situation and he needs to stuff the run. So there's a lot of things you can do with them. I like the pick. Another one that I was totally on board with. And again, the leadership, Sean McDermott guy through and through.
Yeah, I think you nailed the first four here in terms of your preview articles for the draft. The Bills' first four picks were all included in those. So my man AJ really knocking it out of the park for the Batavia Daily News. And you mentioned Cover One as well. I think they were the only local outlet to be live from the draft, and I think they were there all 3 days if I'm not mistaken. So great commitment from those guys. And we'll have Greg Tomset from Cover One on with us on Wednesday. Also Joe Marino of Locked On Bills. So looking forward to that episode.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be a fun one to dive into. And again, they bring so much detail and nuance to their conversation. So I'm excited to break it down with those guys coming up on Wednesday here.
Absolutely. And then you have perhaps my favorite player of the Bills draft class, Kentucky running back Ray Davis, picked at number 28 of the fourth round, a strong physical back, standing 5'8", weighing 211 pounds. Expected to be a compliment to James Cook. You also have Ty Johnson in the mix, of course, who the Bills re-signed this offseason. Davis, believed to be the first player in NCAA history to rush for over 1,000 yards with 3 teams, played for Temple, Vanderbilt, and Kentucky. Last season for Kentucky, 1,100 yards, 14 rushing touchdowns, 7 receiving touchdowns, set a new program record for total touchdowns in a single season. So this guy has really exhibited his ability to do it all, and he's got resilience in his background. He endured challenges during his youth. He entered the foster care system in California at age 8, said during his press availability. He had to become a man at age 12, and that's really taught him a lot throughout his life. And I'm expecting him to be a good pro for the Bills. Yeah,
Ray Davis. And I like the pick. Again, another solid pick. We'll see how it translates. You know, a lot of people were fond of Zach Moss and the Devin Singletaries of the world, so that didn't really pan out with what the Bills had in store. I think Singletary did, but again, it's hard to really have confidence re-signing a running back in today's world. So back to Ray Davis, 5'8", so a little bit undersized, 210, 212-ish he plays around. Very good at being a bruiser, running through people, running downhill. But he's underrated in 2 things, and I think this is what stood out to me. He ran a 4.54 40-yard dash. So he not only can he run downhill, but I think he has the ability to make defenders miss and kind of hit the gas pedal and accelerate in the third level to get by those secondary defenders, and also pass catching ability. 7 receiving touchdowns last year with the Wildcats, 21 total with Kentucky, so a school record. So this guy's breaking records at Kentucky. Like you said, accomplished at 3 different spots. I think that's important. A high character guy. I think one of the things that stood out to me from his presser, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't know exactly what he said, but he was like, I don't run from my problems. I go right at them. And I think that's kind of the attitude that he brings with him on the football field. He runs through people. He wants to be physical. He'll be a great 1-2 punch to James Cook. And Alex, it will be interesting to see how the running back room shapes up, because I think Ty Johnson was very good down the stretch. And even with Ken Dorsey, I think he was very he didn't have a lot of production or volume, but when he did get his carries in the backfield or pass catching opportunities, he was very efficient with those. So Ty Johnson, James Cook, Ray Davis, I think that's a solid 3. You got younger at the position. Damian Harris never worked out. He had the injury. Latavius Murray, older back that just never really found his footing. I think he was solid enough because they needed that pass blocking running back last year so badly because James Cook was just unable to. Like from training camp, I knew that he was just not good enough yet to become that certified third down pass blocker. I think he could still become that, but it's a work in progress. So yeah, I love it. Like you said, like Joey Hatch says in the comments here, 210 pounds, loves contact, runs angry. That's exactly what the Bills need behind James Cook.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think they're hoping that he can step in and perhaps do that for them perhaps immediately. I'm trying to show the comment. This is my first time showing a comment on StreamYard. We're still learning with the people here on right now, live Buffalo Football Talk. But thanks, Joey Hatch, for chiming in. And we'll go back to Keon Coleman quick. John Robert, Andre Reed was reached out to by Keon Coleman, and that just shows great maturity, and a great feeling for the moment. You sense what Andre Reed means to the Bills and the fan base, and you know what it would mean to the fan base to have their rookie wide receiver reach out to a legend like Andre Reed. He did that. He asked him for some tips and whatnot. So really great stuff from Keon Coleman there.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. Again, and like Reed mentioned, he said that he was the only young receiver to really reach out to himself with the Bills' new organization, or whatever, the new Bills kind of group of receivers. And I think that's important for a guy to come in and have the awareness and the wherewithal to go out and reach out to a guy that's done it in a Buffalo uniform, one of the legends of this city in terms of sports. I think it just shows a lot about what Coleman is, and that personality, man. I maybe it won't match, but that personality with Josh Allen, he's always described as like a big kid. Like, he's always joking around and having fun. And Coleman seems that same way. Like, you look at the guy and he's a very intimidating 6'4", big bodied guy, but he's kind of just relaxed and having fun and loves, obviously, like you said, the Wegmans cookies. So yeah, it's good to see that he's reaching out to Andre Reed, and I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, and he's not the only Bills receiver to get some help from a former Bills legend. Eric Mold's helping out Khalil Shakir during this offseason. So the Bills' young wide receivers really paying the veterans, or the former legends, I should say, their due. Now, rounding out this year's draft class, we won't spend a lot of time on these guys just yet. We do have a few questions to answer from our fans. Our first ever mailbag segment coming up later in the show. And the first name on this list will be discussed a bit later. Cedric Van Pran Granger at number 141 in the 5th round, a center out of Georgia, a good blocker, won the Jacobs Trophy in the SEC last year. Washington linebacker Eddie, I'm going to say Eddie Ilafascio at number 160 in the 5th round. Troy edge rusher Javon Solomon at number 168 of the 5th round. Offensive lineman Tylen Grable at number 204 in the 6th. Penn State cornerback Daquan Hardy, a return man as well, at number 219 in the 6th round. And Travis Clayton, a member of the International Pathway Program, at number 221 in the 7th round. My favorite player from this group has to be Travis Clayton, just a physical freak who was compared to J.J. Watt with his measurables at the combine and his specs and everything he was able to do there. And at offensive line, really a talented athletic freak. Also, Javon Solomon, an undersized pass rusher who led the FBS with 16 sacks last season. Certainly a chip on his shoulder, kind of an up and down collegiate career, but coming off quite the season. So who stands out to you from this group?
Yeah, I think Cedric Van Pran Granger obviously really stands out. Mafia members, I do agree. I think the vibes from Coleman are immaculate right now. But back to Van Pran, I think he can really just step right in and be that center, at least competition. Because again, that's another thing we can't project right now. It's so early. But again, David Edwards didn't get that big of a contract. I think it's under $3 million per year annually. So or around there at least. So you're getting a guy that has college experience at Georgia, over 40 starts, was considered one of the best centers in football, or in college football at least. So again, I think he stands out to me because they do need that youth at center. And I think that he can come in and it's kind of a steal at that spot. Another guy, Daquan Hardy, that, Chris Trapasso had a great write-up of him on Twitter, over on X. I call it Twitter still, I'm sorry. But Trapasso had a great write-up of Hardy and his ability to be sticky in coverage, needs to have some better fluidity with his hips and be more versatile on the outside. But as a slot corner, he was very good at Penn State. And again, that punt return ability, Hardy, Daquan Hardy, not Deontay Hardy. And it's a T, Deontay, and now it's a D, Hardy. So the same. Right. I struggle with names, Alex. So for me, I was excited to hear that maybe the next Bills punt returner might be just Hardy.
A Hardy for a Hardy.
Yeah, exactly. So I like that signing and then draft pick. And then again, Solomon is a very, very intriguing prospect. It's interesting because the Bills with Epinesa and Rousseau kind of went that big frame, tall-bodied, high upside, high ceiling type of players. Von Miller and Solomon are kind of that opposite. Solomon, again, undersized, 16 sacks, very bendy. I think he has very good technique. The only thing that has concern about with him is, one, his college competition, and two, his ability to get around those big 6'7", 320-pound offensive tackles and not get blown off the ball. So those three guys really stood out to me. And yeah, like you said about the Travis Clayton, a physical freak. Yeah, like you said, he's just a big guy that has high upside that who knows, maybe it'll work out.
Yeah, he's got great personality as well, Clayton. Really enjoyed speaking with him over Zoom, and it was great to see the excitement on his face upon being selected. It was coming down to the end of the draft, and I think he and the other international players that hadn't been drafted were making their way to the stage for a type of presentation, and instead he got the hat, threw it on, and was drafted by the Bills. And it was also just great to see the UK media really proud of one of their own coming over and satisfying and fulfilling his dream at the NFL level. But
JG makes a good point here, Alex. But by the way, just before, one last thing about the double dipping. I did think the Bills were going to add it day 3. I don't know how you felt, but the Malik Washington from Virginia and Rice at wide receiver from USC. There was McCaffrey from Rice University. So there were a lot of options.
That NFL pedigree, McCaffrey.
Yes. So there were a lot of options there, right? Like I think, and we'll get to it in a bit, but I think they do believe in what they currently have in that wide receiver.
All right. The Bills also signed a number of undrafted free agents, which our guy at Syracuse.com, Ryan Talbot, just absolutely dominates it every year. It's the Talbot dynasty in full effect. He and Damon over at Draft Diamonds reporting on all the new players latching on with Buffalo post-draft. We won't dive into all of them, but my favorite of the lot and many Bills fans' favorite, Frank Gore Jr., the son of former Bills running back and, in my opinion, future Hall of Famer Frank Gore, finished last season with 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns for Southern Miss. And we've talked about the football pedigree before. Once again, it's presented with Frank Gore Jr., really a bowling ball of a running back if you look at him, and really could provide a punch for this team. Who's your favorite of this group?
Yeah, I'll go the same. I'm not gonna disagree. I think bringing in Frank Gore Jr. Frank Gore was ecstatic for his son to join the Bills. Spoke highly of Brandon Beane. Loved the Ray Davis selection on Twitter. They were talking about how Frank Gore reached out to Brandon Beane and was saying how he loved the Ray Davis selection. So Frank Gore Jr., that'll be a very fun. He's probably going to be the rookie mini camp, at least darling. If he gets a training camp, good for him. But it'll be interesting to see how that pans out, because you have the Andy Isabellas of the world that Bills fans fall in love with. You have the Christian Wade experiment that, obviously he takes one to the house in his first carry. So there's always that one guy that Bills fans seem to latch onto. And I think Frank Gore Jr., as long as he can prolong his NFL career, and if he's anything like his father, he's obviously going to be there at St. John Fisher University.
Yeah, no doubt. Finally, another addition. Little sticky situation here with Quintez Cephus coming off that suspension for the NFL, a violation of the NFL gambling policy, but a player who has shown ability before at the NFL level, played in Detroit for 3 seasons, 37 passes caught, 568 yards, and 4 touchdowns over those 3 seasons. 6'1", 202 pounds. Not sure what we're going to see out of Cephus, but I'm not sure it's the big ticket free agent wide receiver that Bills fans wanted. But hey, Bills get another wide receiver to throw into that group. Yeah,
it's again just another name to add, because if you really look at this wide receiver room, and I know we're right about to dive into this, but I'm going to get ahead of the ship a little bit. You look at, again, Samuel, now you have Coleman in there, you got Shakir and Hollins. That's probably your top 4, right? So you're probably thinking they usually keep 6 every season. There's been a couple years under Bean where they've kept 7, but it's usually 6. You got a lot of guys, Justin Shorter, Terrell Shavers, Cephus, the new free agent that you just mentioned. So there's a lot of guys, KJ Hamler, another guy that's very intriguing. So there's a lot of guys that are going to be fighting for those last 2 spots. And I really think it's going to come down to whoever just performs the best during the preseason and training camp. And I don't think that's a bad route to go with. I think you have enough trust in your top 4 right now, along with Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, that you feel confident that you can try and figure out who is the best option among those 4, 5, 6 names that I just mentioned, and see what happens. That's kind of where I'm at. Cephus adds to that room. He had some potential in Detroit before the gambling ordeal. So we'll see what happens. But again, they're trying to figure it out. And I think letting 5, 6 guys fight out to play with Josh Allen for 2 spots is not a bad idea.
All right, now let's dive into the construction of the Bills roster. Obviously, after the draft, things starting to shape up in that regard. Mini camps coming up, training camp not too far off. Going into this offseason, there was a lot of question whether the Bills could maintain their position as a Super Bowl contender, and there's still question regarding that with kind of the offseason that they've had and not making a big splash in the draft. But if you ask Las Vegas, the Bills are still one of the top 5-6 teams in the running to win the Super Bowl, and that just gives you an idea of the public eye's view on this team. And we mentioned it last show with Josh Allen. You always give yourself a chance, but let's dive into the construction of the Bills roster and whether or not we think this is, as constructed, a roster worthy of deeming a Super Bowl contender. We'll start at the wide receiver position. It was the top need entering the offseason and the draft, and the Bills did do a bit to add to that room. You bring in Curtis Samuel in free agency, and you draft Keon Coleman to go alongside Khalil Shakir. You also mentioned Mac Hollins. I'm not sure if that's enough at face value, but you have Dalton Kincaid coming back. A great season in his rookie year, set franchise records, probably the best tight end that the Bills have ever had. You also have Dawson Knox beside him, who dealt with some injuries last year and some production issues, but he's not too far removed from a productive season a few years ago. So I'm not sure if you look at the wide receivers on this team, it's enough to inspire confidence. But when you factor in Kincaid, you factor in Knox, I think you have something to work with there.
Yeah, Dalton Kincaid was the biggest winner. And Bruce Exclusive said this. He tweeted it. But Dalton Kincaid was the biggest winner from last week's draft. I think that them not trading up to get a Romo Dunze or a Brian Thomas Jr. Brian Thomas Jr. was there at 22. Obviously, they did not like him enough to go up and get him. I think if Brandon Beane, he has shown if he likes a guy, he'll go up and get him, especially when he's in that 20 range. So for them to not do that, I think Dalton Kincaid's the biggest winner on that playmaker kind of avenue with Josh Allen. But yeah, I think this roster, I mean, they didn't add a superstar. Like, they haven't added a name, and that's going to be the big talking point, is they didn't bring in a bona fide wide receiver one who everyone knows. Like, if you ask 70%, maybe not 70, I'll say 50. If you ask 50% of the casual fan what the Bills wide receivers room consists of, I guarantee 50% of them have trouble naming at least two of them. Maybe they know Keon Coleman, but there's not a big name in that wide receiver room like it was with Stephon Diggs. So that for me is where there is some concern, because you don't know who's going to be that guy. And uncertainty always leads to kind of disarray or anxiety in terms of what they're going to do. But obviously Brandon Beane has a plan, and obviously they're going to try and figure it out using a multitude of avenues, a multitude of prospects, a multitude of receivers, and let Josh Allen go to work. But yeah, I mean, if you tell me and talk to me and say, look, I don't think the Bills did enough, I'm not going to argue with you, because I see your point, because they did not go all out. But on the flip side, there's also a different perspective to it. You got to build for the future. You're eating $31 million in dead cap for Stephon Diggs this year. So there's a lot more to it. But if you're going to tell me, hey, look, they didn't do enough, I could understand where you're coming from.
Right. And you also have to factor in what they have in that running back room with James Cook, Ty Johnson, and Ray Davis, as we mentioned before, adding some supplemental weapons to that room and really trying to fortify just the weaponry on offense. I think that's really been a buzzword for everybody, just offensive weapons. That's really what the Bills have seemed to lack a plethora of over the years, and getting a Keon Coleman and getting a Ray Davis and signing a Curtis Samuel in free agency. Hopefully the Bills are building towards something there. But how about offensive line? Are you comfortable with Connor McGovern at center? I know we mentioned it before. David Edwards at guard. One of our listeners, Jack at Bills Sweep, asked, and we'll get to our first ever mailbag later. He asked if we wanted to see Cedric Van Pran Granger compete for that starting spot. I think the Bills, and I'm comfortable with entering the season with a Connor McGovern and a David Edwards, seeing what they have to offer. But it's not going to take long for me to look at a Cedric Van Pran Granger as someone who can step in and maybe compete for a position alongside McGovern, or perhaps at that center position.
Yeah, Van Pran Granger again. Over 40 starts at Georgia. That's really all that needs to be said when you and those teams won national championships. Like it's not like he's playing at South Carolina where they're having trouble. He's part of the best team in the country year in, year out over the past 2 seasons and starting. So I really do believe he's going to be immediate competition to the center spot. Connor McGovern is a better left guard than he is a center. I know he has experience playing center at the college level and some at the NFL, but very minimal in the NFL and obviously a fair amount in college. But McGovern for me is better slated at left guard. I think David Edwards would be quality depth. But again, who knows what they do? Maybe they really like Edwards at left guard. Van Pran's not ready. He struggles during camp, off to a slow start. It's all about projection. He was a 5th-round pick, so it's not like he wasn't a top 100 pick. He wasn't a day 2 pick. So there are obviously reasons why he got drafted and selected in the 5th round. So again, it might take some time with him, but I believe he's going to be, again, immediate competition. But yeah, I like how the offensive line looks, Alex. It's probably going to be the most solid it's been. I know they lost more, so that's a loss they're going to have to fill. And it was a very solid offensive line next year. But going into this year compared to going into last year, I think there's more certainty just because Spencer Brown's more figured out. Deion Dawkins, obviously coming off the best season of his career. Connor McGovern, a free agent signing that you got from Dallas, probably one of the more top-end free agent signings the Bills have gotten in the last couple of years, has played really well. Osiris Torrance played every single snap for the Bills as a rookie. So there's definitely more, I think, confidence in this line moving forward from the first guy to the 8th guy. And I think this Bills O-line is shaping up to excel with Josh Allen under center.
Osiris Torrance, what a season he had a year ago, and just a year better. I'm sure we're going to see great things from him moving forward. Now, the other side of the ball will stay in the trenches. The Bills lost their top sack man, Leonard Floyd, to free agency. But Von Miller, a year removed from that knee injury. You have Greg Rousseau, who dealt with injuries last year. The Bills just claimed his 5th-year option, reported by Pete Schrager, later confirmed by the Bills today. So you bring him back, only 4 sacks a year ago. You're hoping he can get it going and increase his production. You also have Ajay Epineza, who you re-signed, who really seems to be on an upward trajectory, But can Javon Solomon be a potential contributor for this team as a depth piece? Are we looking at Cameron Klein, Kingsley Jonathan, and the like as the top depth pieces for this team?
Yeah, I think they need to figure it out. And that's the weird part with Greg Rousseau. He is such an interesting player to look at because he comes in from Miami, 2021, number 30 overall pick, and he had such high upside, and you saw him kind of get there. I'm going to pull up his stats really quick just so I can use it for a frame.
And you see JG here wanting to spend that June 1st money that's going to come off the cap with the release of Tre'Davious White. He wants to spend it on a pass rusher, maybe a reunion with Jerry Hughes or somebody else.
I'm not crazy about the edge rusher thing. I think that's one of the biggest needs of this team. And again, it goes back to Greg Rousseau. What is he going to be? First season, 4 sacks. Second year, 8 sacks. So you're seeing him trending up, right? He's trending towards double the sacks, 37 tackles. And then last season, 5 sacks, 42 tackles. You're looking at a guy that kind of took a step back last year, had some injuries he's been dealing with over the past 2 seasons. The foot.
It really was a warrior playing through what some were reporting or believed to be a broken bone in his foot or something of the like. So really a warrior type season for him last year.
Right. So how confident that's what it comes down to is how confident are you that Greg Rousseau and Ajay Epineza, 2 guys you bet on and drafted on, that's how you're going to feel about the D end room. That's what will come into play with Troy Solomon. Is he going to be valuable enough? Can you keep him on your roster where he's going to get snaps? Or are you confident enough in Miller, Epineza, Rousseau, and then I'm naming all these guys. Kingsley Jonathan, maybe you can slot in Klein. Like I don't know. I think Solomon might have to because you're probably going to use a 4-person D end rotation. But it will be interesting to see just again what Rousseau becomes because he's so polarizing. They obviously pick up his 5th-year option. Obviously, they did it without question. Being said at the owners' meetings back in March that was one of the first things he would do post-draft. So I'm really intrigued to see what Rousseau becomes in a full, healthy season. I think there's still a lot of untapped potential there. An above-average run defender can set the edge. And then obviously in the inside, DeQuan Jones and Oliver should go back to being dominant. Oliver coming off a best season after people questioned his contract. Now it's looking really good with all the defensive tackle signings over the past year. So yeah, I don't know. Greg Rousseau is the big mystery to me. What is he? What's he going to be?
And much like an edge rusher, the Bills like to rotate at defensive tackle, so you're going to have to get a few of these guys you signed in the offseason or DeWayne Carter to pop and really produce. You had Ed Oliver, I think, play the highest snap share of his career a season ago. DeQuan Jones coming off the injury. You don't want to press those two too much. You want to be able to rotate a bit more than you were able to last year. Austin Johnson, Deshaun Williams, Casey Toohill, some of the free agent signings. Then you have DeWayne Carter, as I mentioned before. Do you think Carter can come in and contribute, or what do you see from that? I think that'd be a home run for Brandon Beane. We mentioned wide receiver and safety as two of the top needs. Defensive line was also a big need for the team, but obviously in terms of depth. And DeWayne Carter, you mentioned maybe some lack of production in college, but the Bills seem really high on his ability to come in and perhaps compete for a rotational spot.
Yeah, Toohill, again, that's another name I mentioned on the defensive end, coming off a 5.5 sack season with the Washington Commanders. So 27 years old, kind of a late bloomer, but he's another guy that's going to factor in. If he can, maybe that's the battle. Like maybe that's the DN4 battle at training camp. Casey Toohill versus Solomon. Maybe that's what it comes down to. But yeah, again, going back to the defensive tackles, DeWayne Carter, yeah, I think he'll be immediately slated in as a rotational piece. How much he plays, I'm not sure. But just his versatility that he offers, I think the Bills need that. They need a guy that can play both. He can do that. It'll be interesting to see where he plays more. If I had to guess, probably 3 tech, just because DeQuan Jones a little bit older, and I think Carter showed a very good ability to run defend at Duke. So I think that's more of his strong suit, and his pass rushing needs some improvement. So yeah, with Carter, I think filling in behind DeQuan Jones and being that kind of depth piece, I would be okay with that. I think that's definitely a feasible thing that can happen come July, August.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of question marks up front for the Bills this year on the defensive side of the ball. Pass rusher, I think, is a bigger concern than a lot of people are willing to dedicate a lot of time and attention to. You don't know what you're going to get from Von Miller. You didn't get anything from him last season. And Greg Rousseau dealing with those injuries, having kind of a down year. You like what he presents and just the production, the pass production, I should say. But last year, certainly not his shining moment. And then Ajay Epineza, yes, he did have a big season, but only 6 sacks last year. So it wasn't like he was a double-digit sack guy. And I think the Bills are going to have to get 8+ sacks out of him this year and really replace that production from Leonard Floyd with Von Miller and Epineza at edge rusher. Now, moving into the defensive backfield, it's quickly become one of the Bills' top position groups, I should say. Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard, your top 2 linebackers. I know Milano dealt with the leg injury last year, but he's really developed into quite the talent, and all-pro, obviously. And then Terrell Bernard, his first season at middle linebacker, just a revelation for the Bills and something that really helped their defense as a whole, his ability to guide that unit and produce in a high capacity at the same time. You draft Eddie Ulofoshio, and you still have young players, Dorian Williams and Balin Spector. You have some high potential guys behind the 2 incumbent starters. I think you're pretty locked up here.
Yeah, linebackers are fine as long as Milano and Bernard. I mean, again, Bernard's a perfect example. Like we're sitting here right now and on April 29th discussing what these guys are going to be projected to be. Terrell Bernard did not see the field in his first season. And then everyone doubted him, caused concern. There were a lot of creators saying that he wasn't quick enough, too small to play the middle linebacker spot. And then
I was one of them. I didn't have much faith in him during training camp. I thought he was too undersized. I didn't think he put on a good display when he was on the field during training camp before he suffered that injury. But yeah, what a season from him.
Right. So then like that, and that's why Brandon Beane has his job, and that's why he does what he does. But it's just incredible to me. Really, his coming out party last season with Matt Milano. And again, yeah, JG had the comment. I think there's more three linebacker sets this year using Dorian Williams because of his pass coverage chops. I think Dorian Williams still needs to work on defending the run, but you're right, JG. I think as a pass coverage guy, he needs to figure out a lot though. Like there's more than just pass coverage, but I could see your point, JG. I'm just worried that how much is he able to process in year 2? Will he get any opportunity? I would like more 3 linebacker sets, but again, they play nickel. Like that's what they do. That's what Sean McDermott does. I don't expect that really to change much. So it will be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, the cornerbacks, the safeties, Rasul Douglas, Benford, I think obviously them not drafting Hardy till the 6th round tells you a lot about what they feel in Kaiir Elam. They could have went Cooper DeJean at 33. They passed on him. He was a very popular name. So Kaiir Elam, another big winner from this weekend. He really slots in right now as the immediate depth behind Benford and Douglas. And then you look at the safety room, Edwards, Rapp, Hamlin, and Bishop. So that's a pretty solid room there.
And you mentioned Elam. Another rumor, you said Bills might be, or JG says maybe looking at more 3 linebacker sets this year. Another thing that's going around, the Bills might be in line to play a bit more man coverage this year, which would certainly suit Kaiir Elam's skill set and maybe help him establish a role on defense. We saw him struggle to get a jersey last year.
Yeah, Levi Wallace was never that typical man guy. You had last season, Dane Jackson was never really good of a man corner. So Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson made their careers in Buffalo because of their scheme and that zone defense and their ability, their recovery speed. Although they were slower, their recovery speed was good enough to be a valuable piece in what Sean McDermott wanted to do. So, yeah, this corner room, Kaiir Elam, it'll be a fun conversation as we continue on here. But, yeah, Kaiir Elam is big season, man. 3rd year, 1st rounder, big season.
Yeah, so that pretty much wraps things up with the defensive backfield. You mentioned what they're looking at cornerback, and we already discussed Cole Bishop playing alongside Taylor Rapp, Mike Edwards during minicamp and training camp. 2 of those 3 are going to come out as the starters, and it's looking like Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp at this time based on the comments from Brandon Beane after the draft, but who knows? A lot can change during training camp and when that competition gets going. But AJ, let's get into some fan questions. We're wrapping up today's show, our first ever mailbag segment. We went to X, asked Bills Mafia what they're thinking, and we got some good responses.
Yeah, so let's do it. Mailbag, first mailbag ever on Right Here, Right Now. I am absolutely psyched. From @J_Gliss, do you believe Bean when he says we like the wide receiver room and the guys? We've got a lot. Alex.
I'm sure he likes it. He had conviction with the Coleman pick. He went out and got Curtis Samuel, so he has fortified the position a bit. Also, Matt Collins you bring in. But I think in a perfect world, would he want more? Yes, Coleman has the ability, and there's no such thing as a can't-miss prospect, but you know what I mean. He's not of the can't-miss ilk. He is not a player that jumps off the page. He's not a Malik Neighbors. He's not a Marvin Harrison Jr. He's not a player that is going to inspire ultimate confidence coming into the pros. He's somebody who's going to have to prove it. So I think that really is the story with this Bills wide receiving core this season. It's going to be a prove it type deal. And Brandon Beane is either going to be really, really right or really wrong. And we're going to see what happens with that. I'm sure if Coleman doesn't develop quickly and become a contributor right away, Bills fans will be up in arms.
Yeah, you got to look at it as it's got to be a by committee approach. Now, I will say maybe Dalton Kincaid leads the team in receptions and yards, but I think there was a great earlier comment up here from JG. He said, here's my problem with pass catchers. It all relies on potential. To succeed, you need Shakir and Kincaid to take the next step. You need Coleman to hit, on Samuel to hit. There's no sure thing. That's the big thing for me. You're going to need Shakir to have 40 to 50 catches. You'll need Keon Coleman to have a 40, 50 catch season. So you're going to need a multitude of guys to have success. And with Stephon Diggs, you really had just, that one guy, but you knew he was going to be good. So there weren't question marks. Now, not only do you not have Stephon Diggs, but you're counting on several different guys. So there's more likely a chance that doesn't work out. So you had one sure thing with Diggs. He produced. Now you have a multitude of unsure things besides, I would say, Dalton Kincaid, and that's really it because Shakir's still ascending. Samuel's been on and off in Washington and Carolina. Coleman is a very polarizing prospect, one of the most polarizing receivers in this class. So you're going to need them to hit, and that's the problem right now is there's no sure thing on the roster. Going back to what I said earlier, there's no big name. So I do think Beane likes it. I believe he does believe in what he does. He's an NFL general manager. But there are some concerns there, and I think he's aware of it. Next question from at ZMP_134, Zach Powell. Thank you for always supporting my page. I appreciate it greatly. You're a great follower, and I always love seeing you pop up. Will they sign another veteran wide receiver, Alex?
Yeah, Tyler Boyd might be my favorite of the group. There isn't much there. Ooh, excuse me. Almost took us down there. There isn't much left in terms of veteran free agent wide receivers. You have Tyler Boyd. Michael Gallup was just signed today. Michael Thomas still out there. Odell Beckham Jr., Marquez Valdez-Scantling among the group. I don't know if there's a lot of great options out there. Like I said, Tyler Boyd would probably be my favorite. And I'm not so sure that the Bills will go out and sign a free agent wide receiver. I think that's something that may develop throughout the course of the season. Maybe you see a trade midseason from the Bills. Maybe somebody hanging around as training camp is starting to close and you sign somebody then. I don't think we're going to see them sign another free agent wide receiver before minicamp or even training camp. I think they're going to go in with what they have. And Bean mentioned that there's no big splash coming, and I know he says that every year. And when we saw him sign Leonard Floyd post June 1st, but I don't think that it's going to happen at the wide receiver position this year.
Yeah, I think they're staying put. Now, I will say I agree with you about Tyler Boyd and Odell Beckham Jr., but again, it goes back to what I was saying about the names. Like, in Bills fans' eyes, if they sign Tyler Boyd, now you read the wide receiver room to yourself. All right, Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Tyler Boyd. Like, I think that would make people feel better. I don't know if it would actually amount to anything or that's actually what they need to do. But for fans, I think they would feel better about the room. He's coming off a 67 catch season, 667 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's been the last 4 seasons, Alex, Tyler Boyd, 58 catches at the bare minimum. He did that in 2022, but over 65 catches in 3 of the last 4 years. He had a 1,000-yard season in 2018. Obviously, with the signings of Jamar Chase, or the draft, I should say, the draft pick of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins really kind of bumped Tyler Boyd. But he was very valuable in what the Bengals wanted to do. Joe Burrow really relied on him. He's obviously very famous for his catch, so I think there would be a lot of nostalgia because obviously he was on the receiving end of Andy Dalton's catch that spring the Bills to the playoffs for the first time in 17 years. So, yeah, I like the Tyler Boyd thing, and Odell Beckham Jr. is another guy. I know Matt Perino said last week that Bills fans are kind of sick of that. They were kind of on that train last year, and now it seems like that's not the case. I do agree with that, but at this point, I think adding Odell Beckham Jr., a veteran presence to that room that's done it, I think would not be a bad idea if the contract sounds appealing enough where the Bills can get it done. But Alex, there's such limited cap space right now with this team that it's very hard, even with a post June 1st, $10 million freed up with Trey White. It's very hard to see what, they can do. And again, I would rather address edge. Like that might be crazy. But I really, at this point, and I'm not sure what the edge room exactly looks like, but I think trading or adding an edge, because it's such a premium, and the Bills have never had a star with Josh Allen, a star pass rusher. They had Von Miller for about 9 games before he went down with that ACL. So I think adding another guy to the edge room would be something. So before we go,
for Marianne Calabrese, does anybody know about Matt Milano? Brandon Beane has said previously that he's been in Orchard Park rehabbing. Everything seems to be on track with that from all accounts. I don't think there's been much update there, but Beane has said that he's been back in Buffalo. He has been rehabbing, so we'll see come mini camp time if he's out there with the guys. Back to you, AJ.
And then last but not least, before you ask your question, this is from Uber from Cover One. A little fun question. He asked, which of the players the Bills drafted could eat the most raw potatoes in a single sitting?
I'm going with Keon Coleman. After we saw him leap from the press or the podium after he was done speaking to reporters and really sprint over the table to grab that cookie. This is a man who can eat. This is a man who's going to eat, I think, for the Bills in terms of his production at wide receiver. But I think he's a big eater. He might not be the biggest guy that they drafted. You have Van Pran Granger at 315, but give me Keon Coleman with the raw potatoes.
Yeah, I'm going to go Travis Clayton from England. I think that's the guy for me. He's just obviously a big guy, but 6'7". He ran a 4.79 40. I mean, if he eats a whole sack of potatoes, maybe that would bring him to like a 4.8, 4.81. But man, a 4.79 40, That's DeWayne Carter's another good candidate as well. But yeah, I would go with Travis Clayton. I think that's what does it for me. I just think that, I don't know. That's the guy I would go with.
Yeah, I'm sure he's eaten his fair share of bangers and mash over there in the UK, but raw potatoes, a different story. I'm not sure I'd like to enjoy even one raw potato from my perspective. But thank you, Uber. Thank you for the interesting question. Bring some lighthearted discussion to the podcast. And one more, AJ, a little self-indulgent from my dad, Buddy Brasky. You mentioned KJ Hamler earlier in the pod, and this is something that Buddy Brasky has been asking me about the past few days. Hamler, a 4.27 40-yard dash at the combine in 2022. You were high on Xavier Worthy. You wanted the Bills to take him at the end of the first round per our discussions via text message. Can KJ Hamler be the Bills' Xavier Worthy? As I drop my cell phone on the ground.
KJ Hamler, I mean, you got to take a look. So he had an injury last season, missed the whole year, was released. I think it was something, a medical situation. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but actually I had the same conversation with Mike Bunt the other night about KJ Hamler, and he said the same thing. He thinks
non-football illness designation during training camp last summer, diagnosed as, pericarditis or pericarditis.
Yeah. So it was a non-football related issue.
Returning to football.
Right. So rookie year, he was a second-round pick, 30 catches, 381 yards, 3 touchdowns, quick. I could see him being a gadget piece, like a gadget piece for this offense. I don't really see him being much more, but if you can use his speed and space, I think he's a guy to keep an eye on as the offseason progresses. And again, second-round pick, had the non-football related thing going on last year, so I think that kind of set him back. I think he spent some time on a practice squad last year as well. So we'll see what he becomes. But to your dad's question, to Buddy, I wouldn't get your hopes too high, but maybe there's a very slight chance, very slight.
Well, if you know Buddy, his hopes are never really that high, so I don't think that's going to be all that much of an issue here. But all right, AJ, that's going to wrap it up. Closing in on the final few minutes here on our hour-long show, a jam-packed show at that. We were able to fit a lot in, a lot of discussion. It was good to kind of spread our wings a bit. We had the 3 guests last week, 2 guests coming up on Wednesday. That's Joe Marino of Locked On Bills and Greg Thompsett of Cover One. But it was good to bounce some ideas back and forth, discuss the draft, and really recap what we saw from the Bills over the weekend.
Yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for the comments. We want to continue to build this thing. Again, I think our main focus here is to bring the scope of the fans to the conversation and what the fans want to talk about. Obviously, the draft is what the fans want to talk about. There's a lot of new prospects, 10 new guys joining the Buffalo Bills roster at One Bills Drive. So I'm excited. It was a fun recap. Great discussion today, Alex. And we'll see you Wednesday on the Right Here, Right Now live Buffalo Football Talk. Like, share, subscribe, everything you can do to kind of push this out as we get going here.
How many raw potatoes could you eat?
Jeez, I mean, I had cooked potatoes tonight. Those baby ones with the butter. I don't know, baby potatoes with butter.
Let's say $1 million on the line, raw potato eating contest. How many is Ajay Cybulski putting down? You're given 30 minutes.
30 minutes to eat raw potatoes. I mean,
how many could you get down, I should say?
Right. It's funny because you could think that they're not mushy. Like when they're not cooked, they're not mushy. So it'd be like hard. So I'll say I could get down 10. Maybe 10. I'll throw that number out there.
I think you're overshooting that number. I'd go with, for me, I think I'd go 4. I think I'd get to 2, and then I'd really start struggling and maybe be able to force.
10 might be crazy. But
yeah, raw potatoes, certainly a daunting task when it comes to an eating contest. But thanks again for tuning in, everybody. AJ, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, just again, like, share, subscribe to this channel, YouTube. If you're on Twitter, come over to YouTube.
The dailynewsonline.com YouTube channel. We're going to start promoting it to that exclusively for certain shows, just to kind of gain our following there. And honestly, it makes it a lot easier for the viewer. You can watch on a smart TV. You can pull it up on your computer and stuff. So we'll be definitely promoting our YouTube channel at thedailynewsonline.com. You can also watch on Facebook. Sorry for interrupting you, AJ.
Yeah. So yeah, again, just keep trying, keep pushing, keep watching us. We really do appreciate it, and we want to get this thing going come, training camp, and we really do appreciate everyone tuning in. JG, thank you. Joey, thank you for the kind words. So yeah, I'm excited for Wednesday with Joe Marino and Greg Thompson, and a lot more to break down regarding the Bills draft selections on the Right Here, Right Now live Buffalo Football Talk pod.
All right, that's going to do it. This episode of RHRN Right Here, Right Now live Buffalo Football Talk is in the books. We'll see you next time.
Peace out.